Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. And for today's story, we turn our attention to an immigration case in which a person was deported, but a judge has ordered that person to be returned back to the United States. And we're going to discuss why. So let's go ahead and do that. We turn our attention to the United States District Court for the District of Maryland in the case of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia versus the Secretary of Homeland Security. So let's discuss this case and the factual predicate relating to this immigrant. In 2019, an immigration judge, acting under authority delegated by the United States Attorney General and pursuant to powers vested by Congress, granted the plaintiff withholding of removal, thereby protecting him from return to his native country. So first thing we need to talk about is withholding of removal. We need to talk about this term, what this means. Okay, withholding of removal is similar to, but also somewhat distinct from an asylum claim. So kind of like an asylum claim, a person is claiming that they are under threat by being returned to their home country, from illegal persecution or, things like that, that there's a threat from them being returned. Now, asylum claims have to be brought in a particular way and at a particular time. You can't necessarily just bring an asylum claim whenever you want, right? There are rules relating to this. A withholding of removal is in some sense broader and in some sense narrower than an asylum claim, okay? Unlike an asylum claim, you can kind of bring it anytime you want. However, it's also narrower than an asylum claim because unlike an asylum claim, it is not permanent. The status of withholding of removal only applies with respect to that person's home country. If another country is willing to take the person, then they can be deported to that country, assuming that country is, otherwise satisfactory. And also, if the conditions in their home country change or other circumstances change, they can be deported at a later time. So it doesn't have the permanency of asylum. It doesn't have the It doesn't give you any pathway towards permanent status like an asylum claim does. And it can be withdrawn either because conditions in your own country improve, there's another country that will take you, or circumstances like that. Now, for what it's worth, incidentally, these claims are exceptionally hard. In a typical year, I was doing some research. In a typical year, not relating to the current administration, but a typical year, there might be 200,000 new claims for deportation. And of those, there will be about 1,000 successful withholding of removal claims. So you're talking about, about 0.5% of all claims. So, not easy, very challenging, difficult to get. But this is, it's a credible threat interview, but it's very challenging. So that's the status here that really matters, is that we have this person and that the government wants to deport them, and they make a claim basically saying, I can't be deported because I'm under such threat of my home country that I can't be deported. And they're granted this status, we'll call it, withholding of removal, where the government can seek to revisit it. Even years later, they can find a different country to deport you to. If your conditions in your home country, they can deport you. But it's this status. So this guy has some status, and that's the critical part. He has the status, okay? All right, so that's what they're talking about, and we need to spend a little time on that. All right. Did the person come here legally? I don't know the answer to that question. Presumably no. But then again, it doesn't really matter within the confines of the claim, right? Because this is a humanitarian type claim. So whether or not they were legal in the first place, I don't know. But they got this status that's relevant. A person who seeks asylum doesn't necessarily come here legally either. So you can get this status regardless of whether you came here legally or illegally in the first place. So I presume that they didn't come here legally, but it doesn't really matter because they got this status. You present yourself at the border. That's how you start the process. That is a way you start the process for asylum. That is true. That's how you get an asylum status. But this is an asylum. This is a withholding of removal process. That's why I spent all that time differentiating between the two, because of exactly this reason. Okay. All right, great. Moving on. Such protection, this status that he has, this withholding of removal status, such protection bars the United States from sending the non-citizen to a country where, more likely than not, he'd face persecution that risks life or freedom. Basically, this credible threat. All right. 6 years later, without notice, legal justification, or due process, officers for ICE, a sub-agency of Department of Homeland Security, put him on a plane bound for the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador. So he's from El Salvador. He has this status, this withholding of removal status, and without any other further proceedings, they just put him on a plane and deport him. Yeah, they can't do that. They don't have the permission to do that. He has this kind of this protected status. They can't just ship him on a plane. They can seek to revisit the decision, but they can't just put him on a plane without a hearing. That's not permissible. Neither the United States nor El Salvador has told anyone why he was returned to the very country to which he could not return, or why he's detained at this center. The silence is telling. As defendants acknowledge, they have no legal authority to arrest him, no justification to detain him, and no grounds to send him to El Salvador, let alone deliver him into one of the dangerous prisons in the Western Hemisphere. Having confessed this grievous error, so even the government's like, yeah, we can't do this. We know we can't do it. Even the government's like, we don't have a legal basis. Yeah. He was ordered deported back in 2019. He got withheld of status in 2019. So there was a deportation proceeding in 2019. The order for deportation was entered. That's true. But then also the judge also put in a withhold, basically a stay on their own order. So there was an order of deportation in 2019. But also there's this thing that we call withhold of removal, which effectively is just a stay. It's like this order is stayed because of this issue. So the order of deportation was not active. So that's the thing. So the rest of them didn't have the right to deportation to due process. We're not talking about anyone else. I can only adjudicate one case at a time, guys. I'm not trying to talk about every case. That's how I normally do things. It's how I did the Jan 6 cases. Every case, one case at a time. It's how I do things. I'm not trying to talk about anyone else. I'm just trying to talk about this one guy, man. That's how we do it. Over on this channel. Anyways, carrying on. So anyways, the government themselves are like, yeah, we got nothing. We know we can't do this. So they've confessed error. But the government argues the court lacks power to hear this case and they lack power to order return. So they're like, yeah, we don't have a basis, but we don't think the court has power. Okay. For the following reasons, their jurisdictional arguments fail as a matter of law. Further, to avoid clear irreparable harm and because equity and justice compel it, the court grants the narrowest, dare sayest only relief warranted, to order defendant to be returned. I mean, he wasn't supposed to be deported in the first place because there was a stay on the court's order. So yeah. Right. The order says that's exactly right. Yes, you're correct, Charlie. The judge's order, yes, I made this point in the whole discussion of the difference between asylum and this withdrawal of status or this withholding of status. I tried to already make this point. Yes, he could have been deported to a different country potentially. Yes, that's possible. It's not the same thing as asylum. It comes with different rules. So he might have been able to be deported to a different country, assuming that, a suitable country could be found. And of course, that country would accept him. So yes, he could still have been deported, but not to El Salvador. But he was deported to El Salvador. So that's right. Yeah. Okay, pressing on. Abrigo Garcia was born and raised in Los Nogales, El Salvador. His family owned a small and successful pulperia. I don't know what that is. For years, they were subject to extortion and threats of death by one of El Salvador's most notorious gangs, Barrio. The gang used Abrego Garcia as a pawn in extortion, demanding he give his mother, Abrego Garcia, over to the gang, or he and others in their family would be killed. $10 from Isaac. Feels like this is getting derailed by Kurt by people asking unrelated questions. Sorry, Kurt. This will be a thorough one for that. Legal questions are interesting. Yeah, also, I tried to preempt the questions by already going over the difference. I spent like 3 or 4 minutes trying to highlight the difference. And so I was like, yeah, I tried to preempt the questions, but it doesn't work. But you can do what you can, man. All right. All right, let's see, whatevers. Attempting to escape the gang's reach, the family moved 3 times without success. To protect Abrego Garcia, they ultimately sent him to the United States to live with his older brother, who was a U.S. citizen. Not that it's necessarily relevant, but still. Abrego Garcia lived in Maryland for many years without lawful status, so he's illegal. In early 2019, while waiting at a Home Depot in Hyattsville to be hired as a day laborer, Abrego Garcia was arrested. The Prince George County Police questioned him about gang affiliation, but nothing came of it. He was then turned over to ICE. On March 29th of 2019, DHS initiated removal proceedings against Abrego Garcia pursuant to relevant law. On April 24th of 2019, Abrego Garcia appeared before an immigration judge where he conceded his deportability and applied for asylum, withholding of removal, and protection under the Convention Against Torture. Pending the resolution of the requested relief, DHS argued for Abrego Garcia to be detained in ICE custody. DHS relied principally on singularly unsubstantiated allegation that Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13. The immigration judge ultimately detained Abrego Garcia pending the outcome of the requested relief, a decision affirmed by the Board of Immigration. October 10th, 2019, following a full evidentiary hearing, the immigration judge granted Abrego Garcia withholding of removal to El Salvador pursuant to relevant law. As a matter of law, withholding of removal prohibits DHS from returning an alien to the specific country in which he faces a clear probability of persecution. Again, these seem to only happen about in 0.5% of the cases based on my best research. In Abrego Garcia's case, the IJ concluded he was entitled to such protection because the Barrio 18 gang had been targeting him and threatening him with death because of his family's pupisa business. DHS never appealed the granting of withholding of removal, and so the decision became final pursuant to relevant law. How can they order a deportation and a stay at the same time? It's not that weird. It's not that weird. It happens with district judges not infrequently, particularly where they think there's an appeal. So yeah, sometimes judges will make a decision and then put a stay on their own order pending, further whatever. And even more to the point, because there's specific law that relates to this exact issue. So that's why. It's like, yes, I give you a deportation order, but I'm putting a stay on my own order pursuant to this exact law. So the reason they did it is because the law allows for it. It's basically that simple in the end. Shouldn't withholding only apply to government persecution, not a street gang? I don't know whether or not it should. It doesn't. That's not the law. As to whether it should, I don't know. Talk to Congress as to should. Accordingly, as defendants have repeatedly admitted, they were legally prohibited from deporting Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. For the next 6 years, Abrego Garcia lived in Maryland with his wife and their 3 children. He fully complied with all directives from ICE, including annual check-ins, and has never been charged with or convicted of any crime. On March 12, 2015, or March 12th of 2025, while driving home from work with his younger son in the car, Abrego Garcia was stopped by ICE. The officers had no warrant for his arrest and no lawful basis to take him into custody. They only told him his status had changed. No. He was first transported to an ICE facility in Baltimore, Maryland. Next, ICE agents shuttled him to a detention facility in Louisiana and Las Vegas, Texas. He was allowed a handful of calls to his wife. He said he was told he would see the judge soon, but that never happened. He never did see a judge. 3 days later, on March the 15th, 2025, without notice, process, or hearing, ICE forcibly transferred him to the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador. A notorious supermax prison known for widespread human rights violations. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. The man has status. You don't have a valid order. You can't just deport the man. No. Black Horse Cavalry says lie. Okay, Black Horse Cavalry, which part of it is a lie? I'm waiting. He had a valid order just not to El Salvador? Yeah, but he was deported to El Salvador, so what's the point of making the distinction? The judge misstated the facts? Which fact did the judge misstate, and how do you know that? Listening to Andrew Branca? Okay, how does Andrew Branca know that? Right? You're making a claim. It's like, how do you know that to be true? Robert Goodvita did a nice video on this one. Okay. Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, what is a lie? Which part of it is a lie? What is being missaid? And how do you know that to be true? If there's a valid order for deportation, ICE arrest him for deportation. They didn't break the law. They did, because they deported him to El Salvador. They did, in fact, break the law. What about this is not... Guys, I don't understand what you guys are getting tripped up about. He had status that prevented him from being deported to El Salvador. He was deported to El Salvador without any further court hearing. How is that? What are we talking about? What are you guys getting tripped up about? Kurt is wrong? About what? Which part am I wrong about? How do I know any of this is true? Well, I'm taking the judge at face value. The judge is telling me it's true. So I'm taking the judge at face value. If you think the judge is wrong or lying, I'd like to know how you know that. I believe the judge in the first instance. How do you know what they're saying not to be true? Why would they be lying? Validly arrested? He wasn't validly arrested because they deported him to El Salvador. Even assuming the arrest was valid, the deporting was invalid. So sure, we'll concede the arrest for the purpose of this discussion. Let's say he was validly arrested. Okay, fine. They couldn't deport him. Not to El Salvador. Okay, what's next? The gang is no longer active. There's nothing preventing him from being returned. Well, even assuming that's true, then go back to court and have a status changed. That would be valid. So if you're correct that the gang is no longer active in El Salvador and therefore that threat no longer exists, then the government can go back to court at any time and get his status changed. Right, because the withholding of removal is not a permanent status like an asylum. He wasn't granted asylum. He was granted withholding of removal. So if the government believes that there is a change in facts that allows him to be deported, then no problem. All you have to do is go back before a new immigration judge, make the relevant showing, and then the stay will be withdrawn, and then you can deport him to El Salvador. No problem. No problem. But they didn't do any of those things. They bypassed this. They bypassed the process. So that's the problem. Yeah. All right, great. Yeah. That takes too long? Well, be that as it may, maybe it does take too long. And maybe there should be a different process. but it's the process we have. So again, if you want there to be a different process, then you really need to talk to Congress or somebody about this, because you need them to like get rid of some provisions or add some provisions to the immigration code. I don't know. Your quarrel isn't with me. Your quarrel is with the Congress having set out a process and status. The Congress created this thing in the first place. The Congress is the one that created it in the first place. So your complaint is with Congress, not with me. Maybe it takes too long. I don't know, but that's the law. There are rules, man. There are rules. How long does the withholding of removal last? Indefinitely, until it's taken away again. It can be taken away at any time. It is not a permanent status. It can be changed anytime. Until it's changed, though, it's indefinite. It's indefinite until changed. If there's a change in status, all they had to do was go to court and get the status changed. It would have been fine. That's not true. Which part isn't true? Again, what are we talking about? The government changed it? No, they didn't. They didn't go back to court. He wasn't presented to a new judge. They did not, in fact, change it. No, they didn't. What are we doing? How do we get them to comply with the law? That's what courts are for. Courts are there to help make people comply with the law. What happens if the order is ignored? Well, the government would be in contempt, among other things, for not obeying the court. It also sparks a constitutional crisis if they just blatantly ignore the court. So that's the problem. Andrew Branca posted the proof. Watch his video or look it up yourself. No, that's okay. No, I'm not going to do that. If you're going to make the claim, I'm going to demand the proof from you. You provide it, or you shut the fuck up. If you're going to make the claim, provide it or shut the fuck up. Great. Moving on. Anyways, 3 days later, on March 15th of 2025, without notice, hearing, or process, ICE forcibly transported him to El Salvador. On that day, 2 planes carried over 100 aliens to the place, purportedly pursuant to the Alien Enemies Act, the legality of which is subject to separate litigation. That's facts. A third plane included aliens with Title VIII removal orders. Many of them were in ICE custody awaiting asylum and other protective hearings in the United States, which might come with its own exciting things as well. Once the planes arrived at El Salvador, the male detainees were stripped and shackled. Their heads were shaved and they were marched into the facility to join nearly 40,000 other prisoners held in some of the most inhumane and squalid conditions known in any carceral system. Since then, no one has heard from the man. To effectuate a mass relocation of those detained by the United States, the federal government struck an agreement with El Salvador whereby it would pay the El Salvadorian government $6 million, nice, for placement of detainees in very good jails at a fair price that will save our taxpayer dollars. Lol. El Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele has publicly touted the agreement terms. We're willing to take on only convicted criminals, including convicted U.S. citizens, which, by the way, not so much. That's another set of problems, into our mega prison in exchange for fees. According to the memorandum issued by El Salvador's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the agreement provides detainees will be held for up to 1 year, pending the United States decision on their long-term disposition. After Abrego Garcia was transferred to the facility, defendant Secretary Noem personally toured the facility along with senior Salvadoran officials. From inside the prison wall, Secretary Noem declared the transferring individuals previously detained on U.S. soil to the facility remains one of the tools in the United States toolkit, we'll use if you commit crimes against the American people. Incidentally, this person was not accused of committing any crimes. Although the legal basis for mass removal of hundreds of individuals to El Salvador remains disturbingly unclear, Abrego Garcia's case is categorically different. There were no legal grounds whatsoever for his arrest, detention, or removal. As always, as ever, let's try to adjudicate one case at a time, right? I'm not taking a position on anything else. I'm not taking a position really on the deportation of anyone else I'm just talking about one guy and his particular status and what the US government did to them. This is the way law works, man. It's the only way law works. You adjudicate it one case at a time on its own facts. It's the only way to really do it, man. It's the only way to really do it. Nor does any evidence suggest that Abrego Garcia is being held at a facility at the behest of Salvadorian authorities to answer for crimes in his own country. Rather, his detention appears to be wholly lawless. Based on these events, Abrego Garcia, through counsel, along with his wife, Jennifer Stefan Vasquez-Sura, and their son, AAV, by and through mother and next friend, filed suit in this court. So next friend status, basically, because he's not available. So the closest person that will do. Like, I'm suing in his name because he's nowhere to be found as the next friend. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Against the Secretary, Acting Director of ICE, Acting Executive Director of ICE Baltimore Field Office, Secretary of State. Abrego Garcia, through his next friend, specifically alleges his removal to El Salvador violated the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Due Process Clause, and the Administrative Procedures Act, and pleads in the alternative qualifies for habeas relief. The matter now before the court is for preliminary injunction. Following full briefing, this memorandum sets forth the court's finding. Cool. All right, as to jurisdictional challenges. The defendant, that is the U.S. government's only meaningful challenge to the motion. Dark Logic says, while I agree the judge could order the executive to return the person, good luck trying to enforce it, given to require the executive to exercise authority in the political realm. As to James says, we're in a new type of war. Well, I only recognize the kinds of wars the U.S. Constitution sets out. So unless the United States Congress has declared a war that I'm unfamiliar of, we are not in a new kind of war. So, no. And also, no. $20 from Jackson Kai. Going to be headed out since your mods think I'm a worthless random. Don't blame your loved you for years. And you're just reading facts. But no, I don't think the judge in 2019 properly followed the law. Well, even if that's true, even if the judge in 2019, in fact, did not follow the law, then the Justice Department should have appealed that judge's ruling. They could have and didn't. Right? So if the immigration judge in 2019 was making an illegal finding, then ICE should have appealed, but they didn't appeal. So the judge's order became final. If ICE wanted to revisit that order, then they could have revisited the order by filing a new case, and they didn't do any of those things. So, I mean, I still don't know what we're talking about. None of the things you're saying makes any sense. When was the last time Congress declared war? Who the fuck cares? Who the fuck cares when Congress last declared war? What the fuck are you talking about? Only Congress has the power to declare war. It's in the Constitution. I know. I read it. So no, we're not in a new type of war because Congress hasn't declared a war. They haven't declared war in 60 years or whatever. Who the fuck cares? What are you talking about? The Alien Enemies Act doesn't say it needs a declaration of war. It also describes an invasion. First, that's under dispute. Second of all, the courts have held, generally speaking, and I tend to agree with them, that invasion still has to be conducted by the nation state. It is not an invasion unless the national authority of that country is conducting it in a military operation. An invasion still requires it to be military, so this is not military. Third, it's still being adjudicated separately in other cases. And fourth, this guy has status separate and apart from that, so it's not relevant to our analysis anyway. None of those things. None of these things, guys. The court lacks jurisdiction because core of the claim sounds in habeas. Defendants first argue that because Abrego Garcia challenges his confinement in the court, the core of his claims sound only in habeas. And as such, suit is proper only against the immediate custodian and in the jurisdiction where he's confined. Defendants are wrong on several fronts. Abrego Garcia exclusively challenges his lawless return to El Salvador, not the mere fact of his confinement. Fact Fact. Doesn't it say war or invasion? I don't know. And even if it does say war or invasion, again, the courts have held, and I tend to agree, that invasion means being done by the nation state. It is not an invasion within the meaning of the law unless the nation state themselves is doing it. That it is not, it has to be military in order for it to be an invasion. That's the way the term seems to be understood, and that's the way I understand the term. So it does not, unless you can prove that the country themselves is doing it, it is not in their official capacity as the government, then it's not an invasion. No, that's not how that works. Words mean things. You can't just change what they mean to other things. They mean things. When we talk about freedom of speech, speech means certain things. When we talk about arms, arms means things. You know, the left always is trying to change words into other exciting words. You know, it's like, oh, that doesn't really mean that. It means other exciting things. Like, no, its meaning has in fact been static since they wrote it. Originalism, guys, anyone remember that? Anyone remember originalism, where we understand a meaning, understand a word as it was written based on its original understanding? Anyone remember these legal principles, these conservative legal principles, might I add? Anyone remember that? When we talked about, you know, interpreting things based on what the term meant as it was understood, based on dictionaries and understanding at the time, the original understanding. Anyone remember that? Anyone remember these conservative principles? I do. I remember these conservative principles. I'm going to apply them. I'm going to keep applying them. That's what I do. Isaac for $10 says commenters are completely exasperating. We're dealing with a fun new issue around due process and having a third party imprison someone who hasn't been convicted. Just buying the amends weak excuses. Again, I'm not trying to make any claims beyond the immediate case. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make claims relating to other people who've then been deported. I'm not trying to make claims with respect. I'm just trying to adjudicate the one guy's case, guys. I'm just trying to adjudicate this guy's case. That's all I'm trying to do. Don't they get to redefine words whenever they want? No, they absolutely don't. My framing suggests they don't get to redefine words. Correct. They don't get to redefine words. That is absolutely correct. When things were written, they meant particular things. That's the whole point of originalism. When certain words were being written in the Constitution, or in a bill, or in a statute, or in a regulation, or whatever, when certain words are written, they're meant to mean certain things. And so, yes, you just don't get to redefine words anytime you like. That is not how that works. Yeah. He wasn't illegally arrested. Even assuming he wasn't illegally arrested, he was illegally deported. So I'm going to concede the arrest issue because it doesn't matter. Sure, he was legally arrested. Fine. He still wasn't legally deported. Moving on. The courts are constantly redefining words, but they're not supposed to. That's my point. That's my point. They're not supposed to be redefining words, right? We're supposed to be doing originalism. Do we believe in principles or don't we? Do we believe in these things or don't we, guys? That's what I'm trying to say. Do courts sometimes not do originalism? Of course. Courts sometimes don't do originalism. They're wrong. They're wrong. That's my point. That's my point. Yes, we should be understanding the words based on what they meant when they were written. That's the goal. That's what we're supposed to do. If courts don't do that, the courts are the one fucking up. What are we talking about? What are you guys talking about? Do we believe in these things or don't we? Holy shit. Your beloved courts redefine words possibly, constantly? What the fuck are you not understanding? What the fuck are you not understanding? They're not supposed to redefine words. Do courts sometimes redefine words? Sure, they're not supposed to. They're doing their job wrong. My only way for me to be able to say that is for me to have a consistent principle. That's the only way I can go, oh, that court's fucking up. They're not supposed, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. Fuck you, court. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. But that's the only way for me to have, what are we doing? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Right? I'm telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I think. I want to have consistent legal principles. I want to apply them universally. And I'd like them to be conservative legal principles. And one of the things that is conservative legal principle is the concept of originalism. It's like, that's a conservative legal principle. It's like, I'd like to apply that conservative legal principle, and I'm going to continue doing that. What the fuck are we talking about? Book of Light for $2 Australian dollars says your amount and message will be public. Thank you. $5 from Pin King 504. Even if the Trump administration actually goes through with bringing him back, doesn't mean El Salvador will release him back in U.S. custody. Well, maybe it doesn't, but the U.S. government has to exert best efforts, and I believe that they could get them to do it if they wanted to. Are you trying to convince me that the U.S. government can't make El Salvador its bitch? Is that what you're going for? Oh my God, what happens when they won't release him into U.S. custody? Whatever will we do? I don't know. The Trump administration seems pretty good about getting other countries to do what they want right now. So I'm not sure that's the problem. We can let them back in when they give us Lake and Riley back? What the fuck? Guys, I don't understand. Do you want consistent principles or don't you? Do you want consistent, or are you just doing this by feels? Are you just doing this by feels? Is what happened to Lake and Riley good? Absolutely not. Should the person who have attacked him been deported? You bet your ass. But because of Lincoln Riley, therefore something no longer rule of law. What the fuck are we doing? What are we doing over here, guys? Do you believe in rule of law or don't you? Do you believe in originalism or don't you? What do you actually have any real beliefs? Do you actually believe in anything? What are we doing? Yeah, at Newspin, I think that's right. I think you're right in chat. They don't. They just want the law to agree with their politics, like most conservative law tubers now. It's sad. Law of self-defense is as bad as legal illegal. Well, I won't echo that last statement. I won't make an opinion as to law of self-defense in general. But I will say that I've noticed several of my conservative-leaning allies on LawTube make what I believe to be decidedly not conservative legal arguments. I have noticed this as a problem, without naming any particular names. But yes, I have noticed that several of my...
New donation from German Nightmare.
Thank you, German Nightmare. I've noticed that several of my so-called conservative colleagues seem to be betraying, in my humble opinion, conservative legal principles because they want the Trump administration politically to win. And I sort of understand that. Like, I understand like wanting him to be politically successful. I want him to be politically successful too. But I've always made an effort to divorce my politics from my legal analysis. I've always tried to do that every time, right? My legal principles and my political principles are not the same. So it's like, yes, do I want certain things to happen politically? Yeah, sure, why not? It's like, but the law is the law. And we got to apply the law with consistency or it doesn't mean anything. So it's like, it's very frustrating. Yeah. The courts are political and redefine words on a whim. They're not supposed to. That's the thing. Look, false prophet, look. Do you want them to? Do you want them to redefine words on a whim? Or do you think that they shouldn't? What are your principles? What do you believe in? Okay, what do you believe in? Do you think the court should apply consistent principles? Do you think they should redefine words? Just be consistent with yourself. How about that? Don't worry about what the courts are doing. Worry about what they should be doing. Get the law right. What are we talking about? Do these consistent principles get outcome I like? Yeah. If what you're trying to do is outcome determinative, I'm not really sure you have principles at that point, to be quite honest. Cody Sams, I've been watching you for nearly 5 years since you were on with Lawful Masses. Your ability to focus on the law and not the feels is the reason I'm still here, hoping for another 5 years. Yeah, look, just follow the law, follow it through, follow it consistently. You know, to the extent that judges aren't doing that, they're bad judges and should do something else. Right? Rule of law, equal application, originalism, due process, so forth and so on, and all the rest of it. It's like, yeah. You're arguing with the arguable, they don't have principles? Well, maybe they don't, but we should, right? Do we have principles? Do we have principles? What do we believe in? Right? What do we believe in? What, you know? Aren't principles good? I think principles are good. Shouldn't we have principles? I think we should. Do people that not have principles, aren't they not good? I think people without principles have a problem. So it's like, yes, I'm like, okay, yeah. If the Trump administration refuses to bring them back, what do I think should happen? Well, I think that they should find them in contempt. And at that point, we have a constitutional crisis on our hands. If the Trump administration simply refuses to follow the courts, we have a constitutional crisis, and that's not fun. I don't want to have a constitutional crisis. Yeah. To me, the underlying issue is how much power the legislative branch is being given to the judicial and executive. That is a fair criticism. That is a fair criticism to say that the legislative branch is given too much power to the executive or judicial. But be that as it may, they did, and we are where we are. So we have to deal with that reality now. What authority does the court have to tell the executive to import specific people? Well, they're getting to that if we ever get that far, but we haven't gone that far because no one's interested in the court's rationale. No one's interested in the court's rationale. So we haven't discussed it. Yeah. Should the law protect the accused, defendant, victim, or both? Well, to the extent that the government is trying to take something away, then the law protects the accused. Because it's the government trying to do something, right? The Constitution inhibits the government. The Constitution talks about the government and what they can and can't do. So the law protects the defendant. It's supposed to, because it's the government trying to take something away from the defendant, their life, liberty, or property, as the case may be. What if El Salvador outright refuses? Well, if El Salvador refuses, that's a whole other set of problems. But if you're trying to tell me that the Trump administration is going to argue that it's powerless to get El Salvador to do what it wants in this domain, I'm going to call bullshit. All right. If your argument is, okay, what if they say no? I'm like, well, I guess if they say no, that's a whole other set of problems. But if you're trying to convince me that the Trump administration can't make El Salvador its bitch, you're trying to argue that the administration's powerless in this domain. We have no choice but to cower to El Salvador's wishes in this domain. Really, that's the proposition you want to go with? Seriously? Okay, I guess that you do you. I guess if that's what you want to do. Anyways, Abreu Garcia exclusively challenges his lawless return, not the fact of his confinement. That's the core of his claim, as defendants concede, which is why his suit remained equally strong had defendants released him into the streets of El Salvador instead of the prison. Right. As defendants did in a different case, they fundamentally ignore the difference between challenging the legality of the removal as opposed to the confinement. Fair. For the purpose of the decision, however, Abreu Garcia simply does not challenge his confinement. The removal itself lies at the heart of the wrongs. Thus, the court need not wake into the murky jurisdictional implications that flow from such a challenge. But even if this court considers the thorny challenge of custody as it pertains to Abrego Garcia's habeas claim, the defendants are not out of the wood. They do indeed cling to the stunning proposition they can forcibly remove any person, migrant and U.S. citizen alike, to a prison outside the United States and baldly assert they have no way to effectuate return because they're no longer the custodian and the court lacks jurisdiction. Yeah, that's not fun. So what happens if ICE comes gets me? What happens if ICE comes gets me and throws me on a plane and puts me in El Salvador? I have no claim in the courts of the United States? Really? Seriously? So as long as they can like kidnap someone and ferret them out in the dead of night, US citizen or not, no one has a claim because they're no longer here? That sounds incredibly dangerous. That sounds insanely dangerous. You can't even speak Spanish? That is definitely a problem. That is definitely a problem. The facts are the United States exerts control over each of the nearly 200 migrants sent to the center. Defendants detain them, transported by them plane, and paid for their placement in the mega jail until the United States decides their long-term disposition. Against this backdrop, defendants have produced no evidence to suggest they cannot secure one such detainee for return. Equally important to the credit, defendants' argument would be permit to unfinished relinquishment of any person, regardless of status or citizenship, to foreign persons for pennies on the dollar. Yeah, that sounds problematic. Nor do the defense cite any authority to support this eye-popping proposition. Sure, they point to a Supreme Court case, but the decision has little bearing here. In the relevant case, the court reviewed where plaintiffs, American citizens, who voluntarily traveled to Iraq and were subsequently detained for violation of Iraqi law, could challenge their detention. Yeah, that doesn't sound very promising. The court concluded that while the district court retained jurisdiction in the first instance, the merit of the habeas challenge failed because Iraq has sovereign power to prosecute the people for crimes committed on its soil. Yeah, that doesn't really work, right? They chose to go there, and then they're all surprised Pikachu face when the foreign government wants a piece of their ass. It's like, yeah, that was a you problem. That was a you problem. Schlug says send him to Argentina. If Argentina is willing to take him, but they didn't deport him to Argentina, so we're not having that discussion. You guys are insane. Could they have deported him to Argentina? Yeah, probably. Did they, though? No. So what the fuck are we talking about? What are you guys talking about in chat? Do you guys think before you say words out loud? Do you guys think at all and use any of your brain parts before you say things? Because I'm not sure you do. Please use your brain part better. I believe in you. Wow, it's called a discussion. Just because it's a discussion, New York Renal MD, doesn't mean that I don't want people to use their brain parts before they say something retarded. You're allowed to have a discussion. Just stop being stupid. Stop being stupid. Stop saying things without thinking first. Use the extra half second and think to yourself about, is this a stupid? Should I be saying the stupid out loud? They should deport him to Argentina, but they didn't. So what the fuck are we talking about? Use your brain parts first. I know you can do it. Anyways, here, by contrast, Abrego Garcia is not being held for crimes committed in or against El Salvador, the United States, or anywhere else for that matter. His claims do not implicate any question of, you have to have a brain to use a brain, well, try harder, I guess. His claims do not implicate any question of competing sovereign interests, and so that case offers little guidance. Thus, while the success of the preliminary injunction motion does not depend on the success of his habeas, defendants also fail to convince this court the claim will not survive in the end. For the purpose of decision, suffice to say the court retains jurisdiction because Abrego Garcia challenges his removal to El Salvador. We're talking about incorrectly deporting someone with a valid deportation order, but the order was stayed with respect to El Salvador. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to go mad. What's the healthy diet version of have a Snickers? I don't know. I don't know. Defendants next make a narrowing argument contending that because claims are not redressable, the court lacks power to hear this case. Yeah, not redressable, my ass. Federal courts are one of limited jurisdiction, hearing only live cases and controversies. A party standing to maintain an action is essentially an unchanged part of the case or contrary requirement of case of number 3. A party standing maintain an action is essentially okay. To satisfy Article 3 standing, a plaintiff must make plausible he suffered an injury in fact that is concrete and particularized, actual or imminent. Injury is fairly traceable to the challenged action, likely as opposed to merely speculative injury that will be redressed. Well, most of those elements sound pretty good in this fact pattern, to be quite honest. Bill Bradley says the reason for him not being sent to El Salvador no longer exists. The gang in question was jailed. His protective status should have been revoked. Maybe it should have been. Maybe his status should have been revoked. Maybe that would have been a valid thing to do. Was he deportable? Not to El Salvador. Not to El Salvador. Hey, Lord. The defendant's redressability argument simply is the placement of Abrego Garcia in El Salvador in prison deprives them of any power to return them. Thus, they say even if he succeeds, defendants are powerless. Really? The U.S. government seriously said we're powerless? We have no power with respect to El Salvador? We can't get this guy back? Really? Really? The Trump administration is trying to claim that they're weak and powerless before the almighty El Salvador? Really? That's what they're going with? Uh-huh. Sure. I can't watch this ignorant American anymore. God bless the Americans that I've made. Yeah, ignorance is definitely my problem. That's definitely the issue. I'm definitely ignorant. Kill me. First, defendants can and do wrongfully return migrants as a matter of course. That's why in Lopez Santera versus Garland, the Fourth Circuit concluded defendants could redress wrongful removal to El Salvador by facilitating the plaintiff's return per DHS's own directives. Second, defendant unilaterally placed hundreds of detainees behind the walls of the center without ceding control over defendants' fates, as detainees are in the center pending their United States decision. Unlike Abrego Garcia, for whom no reason exists to detain him, defendants transport many individuals who've been detained in the United States while awaiting immigration proceedings. Yet, despite defendants' power to transfer those awaiting hearings from the center for a good price, Defendants disclaim any ability to secure their return, including Abrego Garcia. Surely defendants do not mean to suggest that they have wholesale erased the substantive and procedural protections of the INA in one fell swoop by dropping those individuals in CCOT without recourse. Instead, the record reflects defendants have outsourced part of the U.S. prison system. In the end, defendants' redressability argument rings hollow. As counsel suggested at hearing, this is not about the defendant's inability to return Abrego Garcia, but their lack of desire. The court, can we just talk about, just very practically, why can't the United States get Mr. Abrego Garcia back? Mr. Ruvinini, on behalf of the United States. Your Honor, I'd say for the court's awareness that when this case is landed on my desk, the first thing we did is ask my clients that very question. I've not received to date an answer I find satisfactory. So even the government's own lawyer, when asked, hey, why can't you get them back? Even the government's own lawyer is like, well, I've asked my client, and even I can't find an answer that I'm willing to spout in front of this court. That's how well it's going. That's how well it's going. There's nothing I'm willing to say out loud on this subject. Bondi suspended him for that answer? I bet she did. I bet she did suspend him for that answer. That's a wholly separate issue, completely separate and apart from something. Incidentally, does Bondi have a good answer to the question? Because if the Attorney General has a good answer to the question, I'd be happy to entertain it. You know, is there a better answer? Let me know. Yeah, let the Attorney General see if she comes up with a better answer. If I had to take a guess, why do I think so many people here think they should be deported? If I had to take a guess, I think a lot of it is Trump support syndrome, maybe, if that's a thing. I think a lot of people here, like myself, consider themselves also politically conservative. I consider myself politically conservative, and I think also many of them support Trump. I generally support Trump politically. And I think many of them also don't really want illegal immigrants and possibly immigrants at all to be here. And they want them all to go away, which I think is a perfectly valid thing to think and want, right? I'm tired of illegal immigration. You guys are tired of illegal immigration. This has been some bullshit, and we definitely need to deport some people. I was like, I'm all here for that. I'm all here for all those things. Like, yeah. So I think that's part of it. I think some of it is blind support of Trump. Some of it is just being really pissed off at illegal immigration. And they're so supportive of Trump and so pissed off at illegal immigration that they're willing to cast aside any of the law to get their perceived end. But of course, the problem with that is that a liberal administration would be able to do whatever the equivalent of this would be in reverse, and the people who are doing that would have no leg to stand on, other than I don't like it. See, that's the problem. If your argument boils down to I don't like it, that's not really a principled argument. So when some future liberal president does whatever the equivalent of this would be in the opposite direction, and all these people in chat start bitching to the courts, there's just no consistency. This is the problem. There's no consistency. Like I know it and you know it. I know it and you know it. The very same people who, like in chats today, would say things like, hey, the judicial branch should have no power over the president. The judicial branch should have no power to stop or interfere with the president, right? Why would the executive power is for the president alone? The judicial branch should have nothing to say about the president's power. You and I both know with an absolute certainty that, when President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is sworn in, they're going to be telling a much different tale. I think they're going to be suddenly very interested in the courts all of a sudden. I think they're going to be extremely interested in the courts. It's going to be magic. With one simple trick, with one simple trick. They're going to think the courts are the best thing ever and definitely should step in to stop the president every which way in every possible scenario, don't you know? They have no consistency. They're being liberals. That's the problem. The chat is being liberals. They're being a bunch of progressives who are resorting to their fifis and resorting to their feelings. And there's like, I just don't like it. And you're not supporting my tribe good, your tribe bad. I like my tribe. I like my tribe leader. And whatever makes my tribe happy is the win. Anything to score the goal, consistency of any principles be damned. They're being a bunch of liberals who are appealing to their feelings. You're a bunch of pussies. That's the problem. You guys can't handle the heat. You guys don't know what to do. You've been so disenfranchised for so long by so many cuck presidents who are doing such bullshit. You've been cucked for so long that you've been so frustrated by trying to catch the car. You're the dog who's trying to catch the car, and you finally caught the car, and now you don't know what to do. You finally caught the car, and you're so confused you don't know what to do. But that's okay. I have principles. I'm here to help. I will get you through your fifis, and we will go back to logic and reason. It was great. Lol. All right. That is definitely off topic, so you get timed out for 30 minutes. Lol. All right. Horrible take. Which part is a horrible take? That a lot of you guys are resorting to your feelings. A lot of you guys are resorting to your feelings, and you're willing to abandon. Geez, I don't know, guys. I think it's a pretty reasonable take. It seems to me that a lot of you guys are willing to abandon law, reason, justice in order to achieve a pure political end out of your feelings. I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty reasonable take. I have to be honest. Ideals are downstream of power. Well, if you say that power ultimately wins, I think you're right. But do you believe in just power, or do you believe in ideals? I mean, someone with power can effectuate their power, you know, but do you actually believe in things, or don't you? Or do you just believe in raw power? If your argument is just raw power, then I think you're again a liberal. Because that sounds suspiciously like a liberal argument, right? I mean, I've watched enough universities debates and enough leftists talk. I'll watch a lot of leftists talk, and it seems like the left is the one who's like, it's all power in the end. It's all power games. That seems like a leftist argument, that it's all power and all power games. Are you sure you're not a leftist? You might be a leftist. I don't know, man. I don't know. Who do you charge with contempt? The administration. Department of Justice, I guess. Power is apolitical. Power ultimately is apolitical. That's true. Power ultimately is apolitical. Yes. But ideals are either it's the raw power, or, something else. It's like, yeah. Are we talking about how we're all immigrants? No, that is not what we're talking about. No. We're talking about some bullshit. Lastly, defendants argue that 8 U.S.C. 1252 deprives the court of jurisdiction. The relevant statute says, except as provided in this section, notwithstanding any other provision of law, or habeas corpus position, no court shall have jurisdiction to hear any cause or claim by or behalf on any alien arising from decision or action of the Attorney General to commence proceedings, adjudicate cases, or execute removal orders against an alien under this statute. Defendants concede that Reno versus Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee commands a narrow construction of 1252. limiting application solely to the Attorney General exercise of lawful discretion to commence proceedings, adjudicate cases, or execute removal orders. As the Reno court explained, there was good reason for Congress to focus special attention on and make special provision for judicial review of the Attorney General's discrete acts, which represent the initiation or prosecution of various stages in deportation process. Thus, the court is deprived of jurisdiction only for the discretionary decisions made concerning the three-scope deprivation process. So you can't come after the Attorney General for, prosecuting cases. That makes sense. You can't come after the Attorney General for prosecuting cases. But, in terms of the law is separated apart from that. Donna Mike, did you bring the Holocaust into this? It is a law of the internet. Eventually the conversation will turn to Hitler and the Holocaust. So thank you for bringing Hitler and the Holocaust into this discussion, as if things weren't inflamed enough. That was great. You get a timeout so that you can think about what you did. You get a timeout for 1 minute so you can think about what you did. Look. Defendants pressed the Section 1252 precludes jurisdiction here because claims concern defendants' execution of removal order. The argument fails in both fact and law. First, the court cannot credit defendants removed Abrego Garcia pursuant to an executed removal order under the relevant law. Defendants have not produced any order of removal as to the individual, executed or otherwise, or submitted any proof they had a removal order. Nor have they had any corollary document surface, such as a warrant for removal deportation, customarily served on an alien as part of a lawful removal. From this, the court cannot conclude Abrego Garcia was spirited to the jail on an executed removal order, such that 1252 is implicated. Second, even if there was an executed order for Abrego Garcia, his claims do not seek review of any discretionary decisions. He's not asking the court to review the wisdom of the Attorney General's lawful exercise of authority. Rather, he asked the court to determine whether his return to El Salvador violated the relevant law. In this circumstance, the Fourth Circuit has spoken. Bowen versus INS made plain that review of an agency decisions involving pure questions of law do not fall into any of these categories. Of course they don't. That would be dumb. The section 1252 in Borrowing Court emphasized does not apply to all claims arising from deportation proceedings because the relevant law stripped the federal courts of jurisdiction only to review challenges to the Attorney General's decision to exercise discretion to initiate or prosecute these stages. Accordingly, and after exhaustive analysis, Borrowing concluded that absent express congressional intent to eliminate the general federal habeas corpus review, the remedy remains available to Borrowing and other aliens similarly situated. Like Borrowing, Abrego Garcia presents to this court a pure question of law, whether defendants exceed their authority in returning him to El Salvador in violation of law. In the court's view, no plainer question of statutory interpretation could thus be presented. Thus, Section 1252 does not deprive the court of jurisdiction over these claims. You can roll your eyes, but it's 100% on topic? No. You get a longer timeout. Think harder. Damn it. No. No. I swear, guys, my comparison to the Holocaust was on point. I swear, guys, it's the Holocaust. It's the Nazis, guys. Jesus. No. It's not about whether the government exceeds authority, about whether the government made a mistake. Well, okay. I'm not sure how much that really changes it if they made a mistake. It's one hell of a mistake. So if you're trying to say that the court misframes it because the government made a mistake, I'm not sure how much whoopsie doopsies really changes the analysis. Are you trying to suggest that whoopsie doopsies, oopsies doopsies somehow changes the analysis in a marked way? I'm not so sure about that. We didn't do it on purpose. It was just a minor oopsie whoopsies doopsies. I don't remember that idea in law. I don't remember that oopsie doopsies get you very far. I'm not sure it really changes the analysis much, but but noted. You guys are going to be the death of me, I swear. You guys are going to be the death of me someday. A preliminary injunction is an extraordinary remedy that should be granted only upon a clear showing they're entitled to relief. Generally, injunctions are sought to preserve the status quo so that a court can render meaningful decisions after trial on the merits. By contrast, injunctions which alter the status quo, known as mandatory injunctions, are highly disfavored and should be granted only when necessary to protect against irreparable harm in deteriorating circumstances created by the defendant and preserve the court's ability to enter ultimate relief. Yeah, that kind of sounds like the territory we're heading in, to be honest here. Abrego Garcia requests relief designed to restore the status quo ante, or last uncontested status between the parties which precede the controversy. That has returned him to where he was March 12, 2025, before he was apprehended by ICE and spirited away to the center. To receive the benefit of injunctive relief, Abrego Garcia must demonstrate by preponderance of the evidence 4 well-established factors: a likelihood of success, a likelihood of suffering irreparable harm in the absence of preliminary relief, the balance of equities tips in its favor, and that issuing the injunction is in the public interest. As the likelihood of success, Abrego Garcia need only demonstrate a likelihood of success on one cause of action. Defendants concede count 1, the violation of the law, and the court agrees. An alien may seek statutory withholding under the relevant law, which provides the Attorney General may not remove an alien to the country if the attorney... I'm beginning to suspect, I don't think that the Department of Justice is going to be hiring me anytime in the near future. I think my prospects being hired by the Trump administration generally, and also the DOJ more specifically, I don't think my prospects of being hired by the DOJ are looking really, really promising in my future. I'm not really sure that they're necessarily going to be thrilled with my principled conservative approach. I don't think it's necessarily what they're looking for right now. Yeah. I'm not sure that Bondi is necessarily going to be thrilled with, you know what, Attorney General, I think you might be wrong. I'm not sure they're really game for that right now. Yeah, I can't get hired by a Republican administration and I can't get hired by a Democrat administration because my principles are the wrong principles for a Democrat administration. I can't get hired by anybody, man. It's lame. An alien may seek statutory withholding, which provides the Attorney General may not remove an alien to this country if the Attorney General decides the alien's life or freedom would be threatened in that country because of the alien's race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. If an alien is granted withholding only relief, DHS may not remove the alien to the country designated in the removal order unless the order of withholding is terminated. The withholding of removal is country specific and more stringent than other forms of relief of deportation, because once the non-citizen establishes eligibility for withholding or removal, the grant is mandatory. So could they have deported him to Argentina? Probably, but they didn't. Accordingly, pursuant to Section 1231, once an alien is granted withholding of removal, defendant may not remove the alien to the identified country. It's undisputed that Abrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador despite a grant withholding of removal to that country. All right, as long as we're in for controversial opinion day, I have another controversial opinion unrelated to this. I have a hot take. You guys ready for this? You guys are not ready for this. All right, so for the first time in my life, I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but for the first time in my life, last night, I watched Apocalypse Now. I have to say, on balance, I'm not that big a fan. I found it to be, I read some reviews of the movie when it first came out, and I have to agree with some of the critics when the movie first came out. I found it to be intellectually unsatisfying, and I found the ending also in the resolution of it to be unsatisfying. Yeah, so I didn't really care for Apocalypse Now. Sorry. No, just the original theatrical release. I didn't watch Redux. I wanted the original theatrical release. So I watched the original theatrical release and found it a little bit unsatisfying. Yeah. It's not that I find it dated. I just don't find I don't find it the issue dated. I just don't. Yeah, the way it resolves is kind of unsatisfactory. It's fine for like the first 3/4 of the movie. And then kind of once, Willard gets thrown in that bamboo prison, everything after that's a little unsatisfying. And the ending is also a little abrupt, for my taste, but yeah. You think it being unsatisfying is the point? Maybe that's the point. Maybe that is a fair critique to my critique. If the point of the movie is to left you feeling unsatisfied so that you think about it more, because it doesn't provide a nice resolution, so you don't really feel completely satisfied. If it's to leave you unsatisfied, if Demutant is left deliberately out of the film for that reason, then fair enough. Maybe that was the point of the film. If so, I guess it succeeded then. Also, I found Godfather to not be paced particularly well at parts. The overall movie is fine, but Godfather is a little slow on the pacing at times. It has some great pivotal scenes and some fantastic acting, but at times it's a little slow and the plot kind of drags a little lot at times. I feel like it could have done with some more editing. Also, Citizen Kane isn't that good a movie either. Next is account 2, procedural due process. Abrego Garcia alleges that defendant's forced removal to El Salvador with any process constitutes a clear violation. This defendants also concede. But for completeness, the court briefly addresses why the parties are correct. To succeed on the Fifth Amendment due process claim, the plaintiff must show that he possesses a constitutionally cognizable life, liberty, or property interest that he's deprived of that interest because of some form of action, and that procedures employed were constitutionally inadequate. However, Full Metal Jacket is a pretty good film. I think it might be a bit overrated, but it is a very good film. So if we're looking for an error piece that I think was better done, Full Metal Jacket, I would definitely rewatch. I think the movie is definitely overall better. Perhaps slightly overrated, but is a very good and satisfying film. So I'll give it that. How about that? Can we agree on Full Metal Jacket? Are we okay now? American Psycho is all right. Flight of the Navigator? Flight of the Navigator was fun when I watched it. When I rewatched it, it was like, oh, Lord. It's like the visual effects are the thing that gets that film going. Yeah. Emery was fantastic in that movie, for damn sure. Yeah. This is my rifle. This is my gun. This is for fun, and this is for fun. Yeah. It is a very good movie. And the way Full Metal Jacket ends might, in some ways, be one of the most satisfying endings of a movie. I really like the way Full Metal Jacket ends. That is very, very dark comedy, and I'm in for it. I'm here for it. Abrego Garcia has demonstrated that he has a liberty interest by virtue of the INA or avoiding forcible removal to El Salvador. In order for a statute to create a vested liberty or property interest, giving rise to procedural due process protection, it must confer than a mere expectation of a benefit. There must be entitlement to a benefit as directed by statute, and the statute must act to limit meaningful discretion of the decision maker. Here, the statutory scheme which conferred withholding of removal also entitled Abrego Garcia to not be returned to El Salvador absent process. Further, the statutes at issue eliminate discretion. Thus, this element is easily met. As the third element, defendants deprive Abrego Garcia of this right without any procedural protections due him. Indeed, nothing in the record suggests Abrego Garcia received any process at all. Accordingly, he's likely to succeed on the merits of count 2. Lastly, and for similar reasons, Abrego Garcia is likely to succeed on the merits of the APA claim, count 3. The APA mandates that agency action must be set aside if the action was arbitrary, capricious, an abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with law, or if the action failed to meet statutory, procedural, or constitutional requirements. An agency's action is arbitrary and capricious when the agency disregards, and also I cannot for the life of me get through the original Blade Runner. I have tried like 3 or 4 times. If we want to talk about movies that are badly paced, also 2001: A Space Odyssey, but somehow I managed to slog myself through 2001: A Space Odyssey. Somehow, some way, I managed to slog myself through that movie. But I couldn't even do that with Blade Runner. I couldn't slog myself through Blade Runner. Like, it has some really great scenes, and its premise is awesome, but holy shit, does Blade Runner drag. It drags so bad. I couldn't get through the movie. I've tried like 3 or 4 times. I can't pay attention. I want to fall asleep. The movie is boring as shit. It has some really great scenes in it, but the movie sucks. I've heard Blade Runner 2049 is pretty good though, so maybe I should give that a shot. But holy shit, Blade Runner sucks balls. In 2001: A Space Odyssey, same problem. The scenes with Hal are legendary. Everything with Hal, great. Everything not Hal sucks balls. Hal, awesome. Not Hal, sucks balls. And the ending is endlessly confusing. And then Star Trek 1 was basically trying to be 2001: A Space Odyssey in every way and suffers many of the same problems. (2010) was fun? 2010 was fun. Yeah, it was a better movie than 2001, I think. Which, yeah. It's all art. Yeah, that's something. An agency's actions are arbitrary and capricious when the agency disregards rules or regulations still in effect and departs from Stargate better than Star Trek. You better bet your ass. Stargate was pretty freaking awesome. Departs from prior policy without articulating a satisfactory explanation for its action, including a rational connection with the facts found in the choice made. In short, an agency may not depart from a prior policy sub saliento or simply disregard rules that are still in the books. Defendants do not dispute that the expulsion of Abrego Garcia to El Salvador constitutes a final action. Wrath of Khan was good. Star Trek 4 sucks. Star Trek 1 is barely tolerable. Star Trek 2 is good. Star Trek 3 is good. Star Trek 4 is the Antichrist, and is best never spoken of again. Star Trek 5 sucks. Star Trek 6, I think, is the best movie of them all. I can see people giving a kiss for Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan, but I think Undiscovered Country is the better movie. Come at me. Generations leaves a lot to be desired. Insurrection, okay. What else was there in the new gen movies? First Contact. First Contact was fine. First Contact was an acceptable. First Contact was acceptable. Next gen movie. What else was there? The Star Trek reboot was fine, even though it destroyed all canon, which, whatever. Nemesis was definitely cheesy at parts. I think Nemesis barely gets a pass, barely. But it was so cheesy at parts. Holy shit. Next, I'm going to tell you my opinion of the Bond movies. You Only Live Twice is the best Bond movie. You Only Live Twice is the best Bond movie. You only live twice, or so they say. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Escape from New York and Escape from LA. Escape from New York is a good movie. Escape from LA, actually, they're both kind of good movies. They're cheesy, but they're fun. They're fun cheesy. They're fun cheesy. Yeah, they're both fine. Yeah, both Escape from New York and Escape from LA are cheesy, somewhat dated, but they're fun. They're fun, and so yeah, they're acceptable. Regarding the second winner factor, Abrego Garcia must show he'll irreparably harmed in the absence of preliminary injunctive relief. Escape from New York was massively better. I'm not sure if it was massively better, but I'll concede it was better. The standard requires more than a mere possibility of irreparable harm. Rather, the plaintiff must demonstrate the irreparable injury is likely in the absence of an injunction. And also, in I Am Legend, the unreleased ending is so much better than the theatrical ending. I can't believe that the director chose the one over the other. The ending of I Am Legend is a betrayal of the entire movie. The original ending, or the other ending that's on the unreleased ending, is a way better ending than the theatrical ending. What were they thinking, man? What were they thinking? Holy shit. The entire point of the book and movie, is the protagonist is the legend of their nightmares. That's the point, right? That's the point of the entire thing, right? Humanity basically becomes zombies, and we got literally Last Man Standing. And Last Man Standing is doing the things that one would do to survive and try to find the cure and all the rest of it. And the entire point of the book and movie is supposed to be that he is the legend of their nightmares. He is their boogeyman. That's the point of the book. And they robbed it. They robbed it out of the movie. What were they thinking? They defied the point of the story. I hate them. I hate them so much. Obviously, the risk of torture, beatings, and even death clearly and unequivocally supports an irreparable harm. Perhaps IY defendant amenably suggests that Abrego Garcia failed to show he'd be harmed in the prison, but then abandoned that contention at the preliminary intention hearing. Certainly, as to Abrego Garcia, the IG found that returning to El Salvador at all would likely subject him to prosecution at the hands of Barrio 18, to include the risk of death. More fundamentally, defendants do not dispute their placement that of Abrego Garcia at the prison invites this very harm. Defendants effectuate this detention in one of the most notorious, inhumane, and dangerous prisons. Defendants even embrace that reality as part of its well-orchestrated mission to use the prison as a form of punishment and deterrence. Pan's Lab was good. I haven't seen Pan's Lab in so long, man. I forget it. I've forgotten. Is it worth rewatching? It feels like one of those movies, if I rewatch it, I'm going to be sad. Have I seen Taxi Driver? I don't think I have. Defendants have claimed without evidence that Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13 and then housed him among the chief rival gang, Barrio 18. Not to mention Barrio 18 is the very gang whose year-long prosecution of Abrego Garcia resulted in his withholding from removal to El Salvador. To be sure, Abrego Garcia will suffer irreparably were he not accorded his requested relief. Spaceballs? Spaceballs was fun. It's not a good movie, but it's fun. It's just pun after pun after pun. History of the World Part 1 is a better movie by Mel Brooks. And also The Producers is very good. So I'll give him that. The court considers the last two factors in tandem because balance of equities and public interest merge with the government as the opposing parties. That's all Mel Brooks are, just puns. Yeah, that's fair. As to balance of equities, the court must balance competing claims of injury and must consider the effects on each party of granting or withholding requested relief. When considering the public interest, the court should pay particular regard for public consequences in employing the extraordinary remedy of injunction. Blazing Saddles. Yeah. The court is mindful that it may not collapse this inquiry with the first winner factor. Of course, there is public interest in preventing aliens from being wrongfully removed, particularly to countries where they're likely to face substantial harm. Equally important, the public remains acutely interested in seeing its governmental institutions follow the law. Well, we're supposed to, but some of my chat is not necessarily interested in some of this for some reason that continues to heart me. History of the World Part 1 is the funniest movie. Yeah. Big Lebowski was a movie that took me a long time to like. I watched that movie, I don't know. I must have watched Big Lebowski like 6 times and people said it's great. And I'm like, no, it's not. And somewhere around my 7th or 8th showing, I was like, okay, I think I finally get it. So Big Lebowski, I understand. Although I think Hudsucker Proxy does not get enough love in comparison. It's like, I'm not quite sure why all the people that love Big Lebowski don't love Hudsucker Proxy. It feels like it's more Big Lebowski and also more in more directions, but I think Hudsucker Proxy deserves more love by comparison. The dude not get me straight away? Not really. The absence of injunctive relief in this interest, injunctive relief places this interest in great jeopardy, as demonstrated by Abrego Garcia's experience over the past 3 weeks. Defendant seized Abrego Garcia without any lawful order, authority, held him in 3 separate domestic detention centers without legal basis, failed to present him to any immigration judge or officer, and forcibly transported him to El Salvador in direct convention of law. Once there, U.S. officials secured his detention at a facility that, by design, deprives its detainees of adequate food, water, and shelter, fosters routine violence, and places him with his persecutors, if he's still alive. In short, the public interest and companion equities favor injunctive relief. Based on the foregoing, the court retains jurisdiction. Abrego Garcia is entitled to injunctive relief. The court remains in full effect. So he's supposed to be returned if he's still alive, so we'll see how that goes. But I don't have any problem with this. Have I seen The Human Centipede? No. I'm also familiar with the premise. It does not sound like my kind of movie. I think I'm going to watch Commando next or something stupid. The Exorcist, I don't really do horror. So I haven't seen The Exorcist because I don't like horror. Running Man. I think I've seen Running Man, but it's been a long time. No, I've definitely seen Running Man. Yeah. Is Running Man the one where Arnold is on like that weird ass game show? And like he gets launched in a kind of a car looking thing down a roller coaster kind of thing at one point. Is that Running?
Donation from Naira.
Is that Running Man? Okay. Yeah, I've definitely seen Running Man. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty fucking cheesy. That's the remake? Oh, okay. I assume that's the one you meant when you said Running Man. I assumed you meant with the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you, by the way, for the Ko-fi donation. Yeah. That was an interesting movie. Anyone ever say Equilibrium? Equilibrium is a weird movie. It has really interesting gunfighting, though. They came up with this whole thing, gun fu, where people move guns in these really intricate ways as part of a fighting martial art. Equilibrium is an interesting movie. It's a bit of a power fantasy, though, by the lead, though, to be quite honest. The lead basically winds up overthrowing the entire government by the end, which is a lot. Idiocracy. Idiocracy was a great film. Equilibrium feels like there's a better movie in there trying to get out. You know? Equilibrium feels like there's a better movie buried in there somewhere. If someone can figure out a better way to remake it, it could use a remake. Christian Bale. I don't know. Sean Bean. Better than Matrix? No, it's not better than Matrix, but it's comparable in some ways to Matrix. No, Matrix is definitely a better movie. Matrix actually makes you think about something. And then the sequels kind of shit on themselves a little bit, but that's okay. You posted legal docs? On LWC? What is LWC? Have I seen Wicked? No, I want to. Starship Troopers? Starship Troopers is a good movie. I like Starship Troopers. Yeah, it's an interesting movie because I think it's definitely like, is it meant to be like, what's it actually meant to be, or what is Starship Troopers actually trying to say? Is an interesting element because Starship Troopers is about an authoritarian government, but the authoritarian government kind of works, and so I think it's supposed to be a satire of authoritarian governments, but it kind of makes the authoritarian governments look kind of competent and good. So I'm not really sure it succeeds in what it's trying to do. Mars Attacks. I would never see that movie again. That was cheesy and lame. And they only made one Matrix movie. I feel that. Starship Troopers was trying to satirize the right. Yeah, but I don't really think it succeeds in satirizing the right. It kind of makes right authoritarianism look kind of awesome. I mean, at least to me, maybe it's just me, but it doesn't. It's like this is supposed to be like this is supposed to be bad. I don't know, man. It seems like a functional government, and their motivation. The only thing that's perhaps strange about it is their motivation for the war with the bugs is a little unclear on like how that initiated the war with the bugs in the first place. So it's unclear if like they provoked it or the bugs provoked it or what the origin of the thing was. So that's, but other than that, it's if it's supposed to be satire of the right, I'm not sure it's really succeeding. What's my go-to feel better movie? I don't know. I usually like Hunt for Red October, maybe. Hunt for Red October is a movie I can watch basically 100 times and just be chill. Yeah, and trying to satirize it actually writes a love letter. That's sort of like Goonies. Goonies is an interesting film. I've definitely watched that a lot. I probably wouldn't go out of my way to watch Goonies again, but it's fun. Yeah, Hunt for Red October is a great movie. Hunt for Red October is very, very well paced. It's a great action movie, good plot, great pacing, well acted. It's a great movie. It's a fantastic movie. Plane, Trains, and Automobiles. The Core. I've never watched The Core. I'm not sure I want to watch The Core. Is it stupid enough that I can turn my brain off, or is it going to drive me crazy? I'm a politician, which means when I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their lollipops. Yeah. Anaconda. As long as we're at it, how about Snakes on a Plane? I followed the development of Snakes on a Plane. It was in law school, and for some reason, I decided that Snakes on a Plane was the greatest thing ever. So I was following Snakes on a Plane. I was like on all the blogs about Snakes on a Plane. I went to opening night at 10 p.m. for the first showing, and I watched Snakes on a Plane. How about Snakes on a Plane? For stupid fun. That's pretty stupid. I've never seen Snakes on a Plane. Don't go out of your way. Don't go out of your way. It is a stupid, stupid movie. Did I cheer the snakes? A little bit, yeah. Yeah. Enough is enough. I've had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane. Good, Bad, and Ugly. Yeah, didn't really like Good, Bad, and Ugly that much. It's fine, but it didn't really work for me. The trilogy, Fistful of Dollars, Good, Bad, and Ugly. That's like, I don't know. It's like it's something about it's just kind of off. What was the one with The Quick and the Dead was pretty good though, with Gene Hackman. That was pretty solid. Never saw Shane. No. The score is the best part of Good, Bad, and Ugly. I feel that the score is very, very solid, no doubt. Clerks. It's a spaghetti Western, but spaghetti Westerns are kind of meh. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. Saving Private Ryan was a fine film. From Dusk Till Dawn. Is that the one with the snake dance? From Dusk Till Dawn? Is that Dusk Till Dawn? Because that movie's shit. Yeah? It is? Yeah, that movie's shit. That movie's shit. From Dusk Till Dawn is a shit movie. It's absolutely shit. It is the biggest, like, I don't know, what would be like genre shift. It is a genre plot story shift that comes out of absolutely nowhere, right? The first like third of the movie or 40% of the movie is setting you up for a completely different kind of movie. And somewhere around the 40% mark, they decide to, for absolutely no reason, do a complete genre story plot shift. And it just turns into a completely different movie. It is the sharpest turn I've ever seen in any movie in my life. You think it's one movie, and then out of nowhere, Kool-Aid Man basically goes through the door. Oh yeah. And it turns into a completely different movie, a totally different movie. From Dusk Till Dawn sucks balls. It is a horrible, horrible movie. It doesn't even make sense. Its premise doesn't make sense. It sucks. Nothing about it makes sense. It's a horrible shit movie. Don't watch it, ever. The worst thing about the movie, I think, is sort of the plot device at the end, right? I'm going to spoil this movie because I can't be bothered to care. Okay, I'm going to spoil this movie. All right, it involves vampires for some reason. All right, so we wind up at this bar. We wind up at this titty bar in Mexico, where apparently it's all vampires. It's a vampire titty bar. Okay, and that's exciting. And at the end of the movie, you have this sort of reveal shot where the bar is revealed to have been sitting on what looks like an ancient Mayan pyramid. Okay? The bar is sitting at the apex of this buried sort of Mayan pyramid kind of looking thing. And I'm like, so what you're trying to tell me is that no one has noticed this ancient Mayan pyramid before? Like, because it's just a random titty bar sitting on top of this structure. You're trying to tell me the government of Mexico hasn't noticed this ancient Mayan pyramid and, like, you know, taken the whole thing over for archaeology and tourism reasons? No one has noticed this massive Mayan pyramid looking thing that is sitting at the base of this titty bar, and the Mexican government hasn't taken it over and turned it into a tourist/archaeology spot. Really? That somehow was the most incredible part of the movie to me. That was even more incredible than the vampires. I was sooner willing to buy the vampires than mysterious, unknown, heretofore undiscovered Mayan pyramid. That was some bullshit. Okay? No, fuck, no. Contact or First Contact? First Contact. I'll go First Contact over Contact, that's fine. Come at me. They made a TV series? This is a TV series I'm not watching. The premise is dumb. Everything about it is dumb. Random, and apparently also, you know, this titty biker bar has been operating basically, you know, in its lawless kind of way, but it's been operating in this lawless kind of way for some, indefinite period before our protagonists arrive, right? It's not like the bar just appeared out of nowhere. It's been there because they know to go to it, right? So this bar, this kind of lawless biker bar kind of esque thing that they're doing has been operating in this sort of lawless kind of way. But the moment our protagonists arrive, suddenly unexpected vampires and the bar is no more. Nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. The movie's dumb. Dusk Till Dawn is a horrible movie. It is trash. It's trash fire. It might be the worst movie I've ever seen. It's got to be up there. If it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, it's got to be close. South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut was fine. I saw it like 3 times in opening weekend. It was great. It's perfectly fine. It's a good movie. You could suggest a lot of worse movies? Oh, Lord. What about Inception? Never saw it. But it looks interesting. But the ending doesn't make any sense to Inception. I know the ending. It doesn't make any sense. Whether the top falls or not doesn't tell anything. Because the whole thing is like, does the top fall? But it doesn't matter if the top falls or not. Because the token was designed incorrectly. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter. Is the stream ending? Eventually, when I get tired of streaming, yes. Why did I keep watching? Dusk Till Dawn? I was with Nate the Lawyer. This is Nate the Lawyer's fault. I was at Nate the Lawyer's house, and he's like, let's watch some movies together. And one of the movies he decided to put on was Dusk Till Dawn. And the only reason I watched it is out of my continuing friendship with Nate the Lawyer. This is Nate the Lawyer's fault. So that's apparently who I have for a friend. That's apparently who that's okay. What about National Treasure? National Treasure is Oscar nominate territory compared to Dusk Till Dawn. They're not even in the same league. The thing about National Treasure is it has a plot and a story, and it tells that plot and story consistently throughout the movie. It is the same story. It isn't genre shift, it doesn't story shift, it doesn't plot shift. It is actually a coherent story told from beginning to end. National Treasure is a godsend compared to Dusk Till Dawn. I'll watch National Treasure right now. We could have a watch party if that was still a thing. I'll watch it with you guys together. I'd happily watch National Treasure again. We'll give it a go. It's fine. I can get through it. How did I like it? It was fine. All right, I'm going to sign off on the stream now. This has been an interesting stream on a number of levels. Battleship? I haven't watched Battleship, but you're right. It might be dumber. It's possible it might be dumber. Yeah, it's possible. Don't go? No, I don't want to go. It was fun. It was something. It was definitely something. Have a good one.